You're listening to Politics Within Reason, the official podcast of the Party of Reason and Progress.
Show the world you care about progress. Go ahead, give us a like or a share. And if you want to learn more or support your purpose, visit partyofreasonandprogress.org. Welcome to a very special episode of Politics Within Reason. I'm your host, Michael Ham. With me is Holly Griffith and Samuel Jennings. Tonight, we have a very, very special guest with us, my co-author on a biological cybernetics paper that has, I believe, one citation, Cara Santa Maria. So, Cara, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. You know, I don't understand that paper that I'm a co-author on. Is that bad?
Well, you did the work. You put in the work. You were a well-deserved co-author, but that's right. It was a bit of a complex paper.
Yeah, well, and I did the neuro stuff, the cell culture stuff,
exactly.
But you did all of the computational physics in it. And so it's like...
You were a well-deserved co-author. However, yes, it got a little bit in the weeds for you there.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we kept to our areas of expertise in that paper for sure.
There was a little bit of separation there. Yeah, that's right. So Cara and I used to work together back in Denton, Texas at the University of North Texas at the Center for Network Neurosciences, right?
Neuroscience, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? One of our other lab mates, it's just lab mates, sent me an email the other day of a video that he found on YouTube of our old professor with a new student. He's apparently still there.
Oh, wow.
And he has not aged a day.
I bet. Yeah, I would imagine that's true. I don't think he's aged in many decades, which is pretty
really
incredible.
Weird. Yeah.
So rat brains plus research, somehow you don't age.
See, now I know that you didn't understand the cell culture side of it because we used mice, not rats.
Well, okay. I didn't use any
Busted.
of it. Crap. Don't tell anyone.
I'm like, I was covered in mouse blood all the time. This I remember. And they were most definitely cute little white mice.
They were very
rats.
cute little white mice, yeah. I like to tell myself they were rats because somehow that made it better. But okay.
I could see that. Yeah, it'd be a little easier. Hey, you didn't have to do that dirty work. That was all me.
No, but I did get to visit them in their little cages every day. And there was these little sounds that the brains would make when we'd hook them up on their microelectrode arrays. And there was these speakers all around the room, and you just hear them go. You could hear the little brains talking.
Yeah, I had horrible nightmares of oscilloscope readouts for years.
Yeah, oscilloscopes are awesome. But okay, so Cara, you are now really into psychoms. You graduated beyond mouse blood, and you're now doing science communication, right?
Yep. I did a master's. I was doing my master's when you were doing your PhD, Mike, and then I did start a PhD maybe about 10 years ago, and after about a year into it, I actually dropped out of school, gasp, and I
became highly successful. So that's the thing to learn here.
Started making a paycheck. And so I've been doing science communication now for about a decade, but I'm actually going back to school right now because I'm a glutton for punishment. So I'm halfway through my my first semester back in a PhD program.
I'm not sure how you find the time.
Yeah, well, I'm really lucky. I found a great clinical psychology program out here on the West Coast that the vast majority of the coursework is done via distance education. And the average age of admission at this program is 36. So my cohort are, adults, like mature grown-ups. I'm not going back to school with a bunch of 22-year-olds because I think that would be very difficult for me at this stage in my life.
Yes, I could see how there would be.
So Holly just got back from a science communication class where she learned how to podcast. Do you want to share some of that, Holly?
It was as a science communication course. The podcasting part was a very small part of it. But we did have some media training. And I just wanted to talk about, I think as scientists, or many scientists, we're just trained to, you go do your work and that's it. You do your work and you go home, and you do your work and you go home. And I think now, especially given the current political climate in this administration, it's very anti-science. And I think it's very important that scientists communicate their work to the public, and that it's important that scientists of, all shapes and sizes be seen. Mm-hmm. And so what do you think is a good way for, how can we train scientists, or how can how can we tell scientists or, students that it's important for them to, hey, not only do you need to do this work as a scientist, but you also need to tell people about what you do. That's also important.
Yeah, it's tough because I think it needs to be included in the curriculum, but also
say that,
yeah. Also, there's a lot of things that need to be included in the curriculum that aren't for PhD students. Like maybe when you get a doctorate of philosophy, you should take, I don't know, a philosophy class. That would be helpful. And maybe you should take some ethics training and also probably some courses in how to teach. None of those things we're well prepared for when we're in graduate school, which is kind of insane. And yes, I do think science communication courses should be mandatory. There are some really great programs available. You just said that you attended one. Some co-founders and myself, Sarah Curtis, Jason Goldman, and I actually started basically like a sleepaway camp for grown-ups who want to improve their science communication skills called SciComm Camp. And we just completed our 3rd year of that. And it's so much fun because people come from all over the country to improve their science communication skills. And it's great, but like we're one of like very few outlets that offer this. And so we need to see this in more places. It needs to be more accessible. And honestly, it would be great if it were mandatory for a lot of young scientists so that they start early in understanding how to have these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've noticed, so I've been doing, I guess I didn't realize what it was when I started doing it. I like one day in 2008, I just picked up, my phone and I was like, what's this Twitter thing? Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I work in mission control. Maybe people would be interested in hearing about that in 140 characters or less. Not many people were on Twitter at the time. And it kind of grew, and I met a lot of really cool people, that I still interact with and talk to. And, but there are, I don't want to say rules, but there are, things you should do and things you should not do. Definitely. Yeah. And I just think that teaching that to, other scientists, like, hey, there is this medium and people do want to hear about what you do. And it is important. I think that's important, is teaching them that, the basics, and then also letting them know that they would have an audience should they choose to do it. Like, hey, people are actually interested in what you want to do, because I think a problem is that maybe they think, well, no one's going to care. No one's going to care about what I do. So, yeah, I don't know. I think putting it in schools in the curriculum is definitely a big part of it. But I mean, I was lucky, working at NASA to have the opportunity to take this class, but a lot of other scientists don't. Yeah. And so, I was just interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's absolutely something that I think we need to see more of. I think it's changing. I mean, what I notice when we actually do SciComm Camp is that the people that are choosing to come, they do run the gamut in terms of their careers and in terms of their science communication experience. Like, we definitely have some seasoned veterans who have been blogging for a long time, or people who write for major outlets, or people who have YouTube channels or on television, and, everything in between. PIOs at big universities. We even had a couple NASA people there this year. Yeah, it was great. But I would say that probably the majority of people who come are young. They're graduate students, and they're individuals who are, just getting interested in SciComm and either aren't sure if they want to continue in academia or have decided that the only way to be able to not lose their minds if they continue in academia is to be able to do science communication in parallel. And so there's a hunger and there's an interest, I think, in the younger cohort. And part of it is just kind of waiting for the professors that are maybe not as understanding or not as appreciative or not as empowering to, go to the great academic beyond.
What I think's interesting about your show, Cara, which is Talk Nerdy to Me, that's the main one that I follow, is that you just had Kelly Wienersmith on, who's a biologist, and she's wrote a book with her husband Zach, who does was it Sunday morning breakfast cereal?
Saturday morning breakfast.
Saturday morning, yeah, one of those days.
SMBC,
right? SMBC, yeah.
Exactly.
One of those weekend days, breakfast cereal.
Exactly. Yeah. You get cereal on both days.
You get cereal on the weekends. It's great. But anyways, she had a really great podcast, and she was talking about one of the names of her papers, right? Was like had related to the Crypt Keeper, and she was just talking about how she tries to really
something like Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah, Tales from the Crypt. Yeah. And it was about parasites, I believe it was, like parasitic behavior, and Anyways, the point is, like, your podcast works to make science communication kind of fun and interesting. And I think that may be getting at what Holly's doing, and maybe something like these pods can do is allowing scientists to come on and, talk and have experienced people kind of guide them through. It was a really great interview. I highly recommend checking it out.
It's important, right? Because I'm used to this at this point. I've been doing this for 10 years. I do a lot of on-air camera work. Like, I right now work for National Geographic, and I do Bill Nye Saves the World on Netflix. But I previously did a lot of work with Al Jazeera, and I was on a live daily show on Pivot for, a year, and, so on and so forth. And so I interview scientists like all the time. And just the same way, Holly, that you were saying that there's certain like do's and don'ts and certain skills that you can develop depending on your medium, depending on your outlet, as a science communicator and as a journalist, which those are two different things, by the way. And so I work in different capacities depending on my job. You do really have to develop some expertise in like how to talk to somebody who's maybe not very comfortable talking with a microphone in front of them or on camera. Learning how to frame questions and how to make people comfortable and all that kind of stuff, because there is this sort of scientist way, which is like when you first put them in front of the camera, they like seize up and then they start just like blabbering really, really jargony, smart
big words.
And they're like, I'm smart, I swear. And I'm like, no, you don't have to prove it. Everybody knows you're smart. Like, there's no competition here. Like, talk to me like you know me as a friend.
Is it because they want to be as technically accurate as possible, and that's maybe why they start doing that?
It's a big part of it. I think there's multiple things. I do think that there's an intrinsic, like, human nature thing when you have a lot of expertise in your career to present yourself in the best light. And I think we have been sort of browbeaten as scientists into thinking that the best light is to just sound like you're really smart and be esoteric. So I think that's part of it. But I also think that the other thing is, yes, they are, for good reason, incredibly wary about being misquoted by journalists and being misrepresented by the media and having their science either sold short or misinformed or kind of repackaged into something sort of provocative and clickbaity, and that doesn't really represent the science. So I always have to walk this really fine line. And when I teach science communication, I have this list of like top 5 things to know about SciComm or whatever. And the first one is actually know your audience. That's like, you can't get anywhere if you don't know who you're speaking to.
Yes, and that's definitely something that they talked about, but like absolutely, like that's right at the beginning, like hands down, you need to do that. But the second one they always say is never underestimate the intelligence of your audience, but always underestimate their vocabulary. So the thing is, I'm not asking you to dumb it down, and you see this, but producers do this a lot, and it really makes me cringe because I'll be out in the field and I'll be, working out some rapport with a scientist to get a good interview, and they'll sort of butt in and they'll be like, listen, I'm really confused. Like, tell it to me like I'm your grandma, or like, just dumb it down for me. Tell it to me like I'm stupid. And I'm like, you just fucking lost all respect with that scientist, and they no longer trust you, and you kind of ruined this interview for me. Like, that sucks, because the truth of the matter is I don't want them to dumb it down. There's no need to dumb it down for the audience. But if they use all these really big words that are necessary in the sciences, they're shortcuts for having to use 10 words to say the same thing you could say with one. Well, let's take the time and use the 10 normal words. Right. And people are going to understand it conceptually. Like, I can't think of a single topic that I've ever covered in science that was so complicated that we couldn't talk about it in normal human language.
I have a hard time with string theory, but
Yeah, but so do string theorists. Like,
if you've ever read a string theory book,
Exactly. And if you talk to a string theorist and you're like, how much of this is actually evidence-based? And they're like, oh, like none of it.
Like, wonderful theory.
We don't know if any of this is actually true. Like, oh, okay.
Essentially what you're saying is, all you have to do is operate from the common vernacular. And, as long as you don't retreat into technical jargon, people are happy to learn about science.
Yeah, and really, talk to me like I'm a human being. Don't talk to me like I'm your student. Don't talk to me like I'm a child. Talk to me like I'm a person who's having a drink with you. Because
what do you do when the conversation gets emotional, right? The problem with politics, and I'm going to just kind of switch gears here, is that politics is very emotional. It's part of our identity, right? And so you perceive this people questioning things, contentious social issues, for example, you kind of perceive that as an attack on you personally. And so do you have any ideas for like how do you remove yourself? I had this crazy thing happen today, which is I had a discussion on Facebook that I thought was going badly, and then a person actually said, "Hey, that changed my mind," and that never happens. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's a Halloween gag, right? I'm pretty sure, but it did happen, and we both sort of stayed respectful through the whole thing, and we kind of came to a conclusion at the end, which was really strange. But what happens when the emotions start taking over?
Yeah, so that's a really tough one, and I think politics is a real conduit for that. But we do deal with it quite a bit on the Skeptic's Guide as well, because of course that podcast is a science and skepticism podcast. So we often talk about people's sacred cows. We talk about aspects of pseudoscience like alternative medicine or beliefs in things like ghosts or spirits. Things that I don't usually talk about on Talk Nerdy, and it can be tough. And we talk about how there are different approaches to it. I personally think that my peers on Skeptic's Guide do take a slightly different approach than I do. They're sometimes blamed as being like snobby or know-it-alls. And part of it is because they do kind of have an unapologetic approach generally. And I do think that there is a place for ridicule. So I'm going to be honest, like as certain things, nothing's beyond reproach. And so we do have to remember that. But at the same time, I firmly believe that the fastest way to get somebody not to listen to you is to tell them you think they're stupid in so many words.
Absolutely.
Or think they're crazy. And so regardless of how stupid or crazy their ideas might be, it is really important that you show them that you respect them and that you respect their ideas, whether or not you agree with them. And I also think it's important to make sure you understand the operational definitions of what you're talking about, because a lot of times people end up having unnecessary arguments when they're saying the same thing because they didn't define what the things they're talking about mean. Language matters. It really does. It's an important symbolic way that we can communicate with one another. And so making sure that A, you're using the same definitions for words is important, and that B, you're talking about these things and it can be an impassioned way, but it also needs to be an evidence-based way. So let's say we're talking about something where there is no evidence, then maybe you need to understand that that's a different kind of conversation. That's a philosophical conversation. That's a moral conversation. But it's not a conversation where either of you are ever going to quote unquote win, because there may not be a right or wrong answer. And it may really come down to personal values, personal judgments, and things of that nature. That's why when I talk about God, I'm an atheist. I do not believe in God. I never try to tell people who do believe in God that they're wrong, because I don't know. I don't have any evidence that there's no God. God's outside of the realm of science. It's by definition supernatural. It's above nature.
Right.
It does not. It
it's
cannot
a belief.
Be exactly. And so, why would I sit here and be like, you're wrong that you believe in God and I know better? I can't do that. I can say why I don't believe in God, and I can say why I think it's important that atheists be outspoken to try and erase stigma around the word atheism and all that great stuff. But I don't care if you believe in God or not. I'm not trying to deconvert you.
Right. But I guess you could also tell them, but you know what? You really don't know either. But then I guess they would maybe fall back into, no, actually I do know because. And it's like, oh, well.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing.
No,
so
you can't have that.
I firmly believe that we're all agnostic. People will ask me quite often, well, you're an atheist, so how can you be so sure? And I'm like, that is not what the word atheist means, first of all.
Never mind.
Yeah. And second of all, we're all agnostic. Some people are theistic agnostics and some people are atheistic agnostics. So by definition, none of us really know. And yeah, some people take it to heart and some people say, but I have faith. And I say, okay.
Right.
Cool.
And, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that, if you're, for my day job, I'm a professional salesman, and my job is basically to walk up to people who have a view of my product which is negative and try to improve that view. And you can't just go head on and attack someone's core views head on. Sometimes you have to be a little more circumspect, nibble around the edges, find a middle wedge where you can get at least some of your point across in a way that they understand.
Absolutely.
I think. Yeah.
But what if that wedge is like a jackhammer? I think Donald Trump is amazing. I think Donald Trump is astounding at finding great wedge issues, right? He's really, really good at this. And so maybe another question here is, can you break through on a wedge issue, right? Where people are forced to almost take a side, right? You're almost forced to take a side. And let's say the NFL debate. We just had this interview with an NFL player, and everyone basically has a side, whether they were willing to admit it before or not. As soon as it became through the president, everyone picked a side. And so is there a way to get around that? Is there a way to change the political discourse? And I don't know, right?
Well, yeah. So
question.
I think it's two questions really that we're talking about. The first one is about changing hearts and minds, which a lot of science communicators really think is the core goal of science communication. I personally don't think that's necessarily the core goal. For me, it's about small incremental shifts in societal values. It's about improving science literacy little by little. And so a lot of psychomers get really butthurt when they're like, we're preaching to the choir, we're in the echo chamber. How do I reach out to climate deniers? And I'm like, okay, first of all, just because the people that are listening to you already believe in what you're saying doesn't mean that you have no effect. And second of all, there are going to be people like the flat earthers of the world are not going to listen to your message. There is something fundamental about being a flat earther that is already antithetical to reason. And yes, there are going to be individuals who are maybe on the fence about climate change. It's those kind of undecideds that I think we can reach quite well. But when people have really hard-lined views, it depends. Is that the approach? Is that what you're trying to do? And if so, there are really great strategies for that. But sometimes in worrying about reaching those people actually lose their core audience as well. So I really think it's important to look at it globally. But the other question, Donald Trump, for example, he is intentionally divisive and he is a con artist. And so I think that it is very important when we talk about somebody like Donald Trump to understand that he is being divisive on purpose. He is not trying to unify anybody. He is not trying to change the minds of the liberals in this country and bring them to his side. What he is doing is rallying a group of individuals who have historically felt like they were marginalized. I hate saying that out loud because I am, talking about white people.
No, but they feel that way, right? That is a feeling.
That's what they think,
Who felt like their party wasn't there for them, who felt like they were written off as racists or as, whatever the case may be. Donald Trump was like, you matter, and we are going to take our country back. And he really took that approach and rallied up, unfortunately, a larger minority of individuals than we thought existed in the kind of seedy underbelly of American values. And I think that, that's really, it was a very meticulous core plan. And I mean,
from a strategic point of view, it was brilliant, right? Like if we're just going to step back and say, wow, that was actually pretty brilliant.
Yeah, but he knows what he's doing. Like all of us think that he's just constantly failing up and he's fumbling around and like finding his way into all of these successes. But these are quite intentional.
Yeah. Well, and to a certain extent, he is fumbling at some things, but he knows how to work a crowd and he knows how to work a group of people. Basically what he's doing when I look at him, and I'm somebody, as a salesman, I practice what I call practical psychology on a daily basis. But, essentially what he's doing is he's creating an identity and then he's setting himself up as the ideological head of the identity.
Well, he's a narcissist.
He is too. Yeah.
I mean,
and he enjoys having that position, but his political strategy is really to bend truth around what he wants to be true by setting himself up as the ideological founder of a core identity of a large group of people. And that's why it's so difficult to break through to Trump voters, because in many ways it gets to their core identity as who they are as a person, whether they think Trump is correct or not. Oh yeah,
because that's a difficulty, right? When you actually do want to enter into some sort of intellectual discourse, you want to actually use Socratic method reasoning, Socratic questioning techniques. That only works when an individual is interested in having a logical, reasonable, evidence-based discussion. But when that is no longer the rule of the boxing match, right? When all bets are off and you can punch below the belt all you want, and it's actually encouraged by the people in your party, then it's quite difficult. When it's like overtly, like he's literally the kid with like the cookies all over his face, and mom and dad are like, "Was that you in the cookie jar?" And he's like, "No."
Well,
and they're
why
like,
is
on his face.
Why is it so hard to punch below the belt with truth? I mean, exactly what you're saying, right? At some point, if somebody doesn't care if the cookies are on their face, and you're just stuck on the fact that cookies are on your face, you're out of arguments, right? And they will come up with any number of just stories.
They create their own reality. It's like
that's why if you punch below the belt with truth, it doesn't sting the way you think it will. Like you could be watching this conversation and then somebody is like, sick burn, because this is reality, and we're like, oh, we got it. Actually, didn't John Oliver just do that? Like,
he does it like every week. Yeah, he does it like every week.
He's like, we got him. And this is what Trump is so good at, right? It's been his MO since the beginning, is this weird thing where the minute that he sees that the tides are turning in such a way that there's traction that's not in his favor. Like, let's say people are like, oh, he's a sexual harasser. Or let's say the people, like, think about during the election when it was like, okay, he's kind of old and he doesn't have stamina, or I don't think he's reasonable, or blah, blah, blah. He'll be like, I don't have stamina. She doesn't have stamina. It's like he'll literally take an argument that perfectly describes him and just say the exact same thing, like the whole rubber and glue scenario, and it works.
It works beautifully.
And he does it every single time. Like,
because the ideology of his base is formed in opposition to the opposing ideology, not based on any set of coherent principles.
Which gives me an idea about climate change. All we have to do is say Michael Moore and Hillary Clinton don't believe in climate change, right? And we're good. Right? I mean, and I'm only being...
Obama hates climate change.
And Al Gore, and that's the problem.
And it turns out I'm actually only being a little bit facetious. There's a really great podcast called With Friends Like These with Anna Marie Cox, and she had a Republican on, and he was basically saying that. He was saying, if you want conservatives to really switch over on climate change, you're going to have to bash liberals about it. And I heard that podcast, and it has haunted me since, because he's right.
Well, you've seen that study where people with self-report, like they took a survey that showed whether or not they skewed more more liberal or more conservative. And then they were shown a compact fluorescent light bulb and a incandescent light bulb, and they were asked which one they should buy, and then conservatives tended to buy the incandescent, and liberals tended to buy the compact fluorescent, and then they were like, because it had like a label that said this is good for the environment or whatever, and then they even made the incandescent cost like 3 times as much, and conservatives were like, I don't care, I'll buy that anyway, like, because it's like the principle of the matter. I'm not some pussy environmentalist, it's just this intrinsic kind of value system. So it really, yes, a lot of it has to do with branding. Like, that's incredibly important. If they're going to feel like they're in any way going to be construed as a pussy liberal, they're going to have a really hard time making those decisions. And it's really only the moderates and the ones, I think, that the individuals, the conservative individuals who really value intellectualism, who you actually see having more independent viewpoints.
Right. That is so depressing. I mean, how do you...
Well, that's the problem. It's like...
you start with that.
Again, it's a societal change, it's like change, as a culture, I think in some respects value intellectualism and value education, and in other respects we actually see. I mean,
if you get sick, right, you go to the best damn doctor there is, right? Like, if you get like some kind of crazy sickness, you will go seeking the most educated and best doctor out there, right? We do value.
Or you drink some kombucha, either way. Do some yoga.
Well, that's the same thing.
Right? On an airplane, you want the best engineers who can do the airplane calculations, or you
got to worry about airplanes as they pump in nitrogen.
But we also make a massive disconnect in our minds between the technology that enriches our lives and the people who produce that technology, and it almost has become so easy to just put something in your hand and not think about all of the incredible innovations that have gone into it. So, and it's funny when I tell people I'm a scientist, if you meet somebody at a bar or something, they're literally like, I've never met a scientist before. Like, that's crazy. Like, it's the weirdest thing. People are like, holy shit, like, you're a scientist? You're so smart. You know everything. And you're like, what are you talking about? Yeah, like, that's not what it means to be a scientist. Yeah. And it really is this super, super weird disconnect between like that aspect of society and sort of everyday functioning.
So do we need like a Homer Simpson of scientists, right? Neil deGrasse Tyson's maybe too smart, right? So maybe we need like...
I'll tell you what, if you want to give me an honorary PhD in something, I will be your Homer Simpson of scientist. I'm plenty dumb enough to do that.
I'm starting Ham University tonight. It's going to be great. You're going to love it.
Ham
University, yeah.
Trump University, come on.
Yeah.
There we go.
I mean,
not for profit. No,
it is going to cost, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm working out the cost.
It's going to cost a lot.
Yeah, that's.
Right. Well,
I'll send you the check for $350 tonight.
Yeah, print-on-demand diplomas are expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, but one thing I did want to point out is we're talking about how to get through to these Trump voters, and we need to not focus quite so much on the people who are sitting in the middle of the crowd, and we need to worry more about nibbling at the edges. Because if we just look and we see, there's somebody, he drives up to a protest rolling coal, and he gets out and he's got keck, swastikas on his shirt, and he's calling people libtards and cucks left and right. That's not the guy you go after and you try to convince. I mean,
I don't think you're going to reach him.
I'm not.
Although strangely enough,
you go after the person who may have voted for McCain and small government, and he's on the Trump bandwagon because that's the option presented to him. But, maybe he's uncomfortable about other things. You find those wedge issues and you use them to your advantage, and you inject a little uncertainty, over time.
Goal, you know what I mean? Yeah. Because I think we're so concerned about changing hearts and minds. Like, how about we just get the people that are on our own team to show up to the polls? We could probably affect more change that way, No,
that's a very good point. I mean, Texas is a kind of prime example of if Democrats just showed up, the state immediately flips.
Well, Texas is very gerrymandered.
It is.
It is. But even so,
everything is.
But even so, if Democrats show up, gerrymandering only works to a point, and then it flips on you.
No. I just want to point out that Texas is a very, very, very gerrymandered state. That does not help.
Right.
No, it does not help, but it's true. If people between the ages of 18 and 35 actually voted, we would have a completely different outcome in this country. So that's kind
of weird, right? Like, why are those folks so dedicated to things like social media? Like, they'll obsess on social media, but, they'll skip every election. And
yeah, I mean, I think part of it is honestly,
it's been true forever.
It's not. Yeah, part of it is not being informed enough. It's being really busy. Mm-hmm. It's feeling like you don't have time to go vote in every single local election or every single midterm.
Or which any presidential.
Understand. Well, it's weird when they don't come out for the presidential, but they have so much to say about it. I know.
But I will tweet about this.
Not
or
even
snap
what's important.
Or whatever.
Yeah. But we shouldn't be focusing on the president. You know what I mean? Like, ultimately, the president doesn't have that much power. Like, we should be focusing on Congress. We should be focusing on the Senate.
Congress has abdicated its power, and it's really gross. I mean, it really... Yeah. Congress is where these things should originate, and the authorization for use of military force, for example, is a big deal where they've just said, hey, the president can do whatever they want in terms of war. No big deal. That's what
happens when every party's controlled, or every branch is controlled by the same party.
Yeah,
it's dangerous.
Well, even Democrats voted for the AUMF, right? Hillary Clinton famously, but right, that's the point. It is dangerous. No party's willing to pull the plug on that for whatever reason. Even when Democrats have had full power, Republicans have had full power, no one's willing to bring that power back to Congress, and that's very strange. And it's very
and let's also not forget that conservatives are conservative, Republicans are conservative, and Democrats are just slightly less conservative. On social issues, sure, we can see massive polarizations between them, but historically, I don't think that we have incredibly progressive candidates in
Although I do think that's changing. So
I do think the pendulum swings, right? I think there will be a wave. And so I've actually interviewed quite a few scientists this year who are running for Congress. And it's been kind of fascinating because this is going to sound really terrible and on my part, but I've been amazed at how articulate and great they were to talk to. You know what I mean?
I get it.
It wasn't the scientist stereotype. Yeah, they were willing to go for it, and they've been incredible to talk to. They seem really knowledgeable about the issues. they're having trouble getting traction. It's still pretty early on, right? It's not even quite primary season.
But we got to hope that they don't that they understand the Leslie Knope fallacy, right?
That's
we've all
right.
watched Parks
That's
and Rec. She always would struggle and she'd be like, but I have facts. I have figures. Look at my charts. And they're like, yeah, voters don't want that.
Yeah,
where's the emotion?
Yeah.
Where's the storytelling? And yeah, she always had a hard time getting elected on that show, even though she was the best candidate.
Yeah.
And storytelling is another very big part of SciComm, by the way.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's the core of it all, really.
One thing I want to point out is that, voters do want facts. We all want facts. We just want facts that make us feel in a way which does not excite cognitive dissonance, which, conforms to our ideology. And that's the danger, at least from my perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, we have to make sure we have an operational definition of what we're talking about. Facts is a loose term.
Very loose term,
in today's lexicon. So it really depends on what you're talking about. But
I got told today that Snopes is all lies, funded by Soros. Yeah. It's good times. Yeah.
And it's nobody wants to have a politician go out on a stump speech and be like, so according to, this graph, that's not going to rally the base by any stretch. They want to hear platitudes. I mean, and I get it. It does feel good when you hear something. I mean, think about Obama in his first term, just the things that he would say. And yes, I think part of the reason that he was attractive to a lot of us is because he was an intellectual, but I think he also knew how to speak in an impassioned way about the things that we cared about. And he did not get up there and read a dissertation when he gave a talk.
No.
He could have, but he did not. Yeah, and
he could have, but he would not have won.
Right, he wouldn't have won.
One thing I like to point out is, we've all watched the show West Wing, right? Mm-hmm. So President Bartlett is, in my mind, he's the ideal of what Americans want in a president. Barring the whole terminal illness thing. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's not so much that he's moderate; it's that we want somebody who knows what he's talking about, but who doesn't necessarily speak to us in just a bunch of dry figures. If you look at the way they have him do public speeches, in private, they have his script very technical because he's this Nobel Prize winning economist. But when he's doing his stump speeches, he's always down and talking with the people. And it's hard to strike that balance where you can have the knowledge, but also know that you have to speak from emotion in order to move people.
Yeah, I mean, and President Bartlett in that show, you're right. He's folksy when he needs to be. He knows exactly how to connect with a crowd. Yep. He's an intellectual, but he's also a little, I can't remember if he's religious, but he never is anti-religion for sure.
He's a Catholic.
Yeah, he is Catholic. You're right. So he's an intellectual, but he's also a Catholic, and he's got a very kind of JFK or Bobby vibe to him. But that said, this is Sorkin, and in Sorkin's world, super, super smart people are the people we want to be in power. Right. And Sorkin is an unapologetic liberal, and The West Wing is an unapologetically liberal show.
I mean,
maybe he's what? Yeah, maybe he's what half of them.
Yeah, exactly. Want to see, and you're right. I think he does have this folksy way that he can connect with people, but I still don't know if any hardcore, anti-abortion, anti-gay marriage, anti-climate change conservatives really identified with him either.
No.
And that's really the hard thing. The truth of the matter is, I think politicians understand how to use third rail issues to their benefit. I think that Donald Trump honestly doesn't give two shits about abortion. I don't think he gives two shits about women's reproductive rights. I think that he knows that if he doubles down on these incredibly divisive social issues, that he'll be able to rally his base.
Well, he knows he knows it'll make liberals upset, and if it makes liberals upset or progressives upset, then that automatically translates into happiness. That's a win, right?
That's a win.
Yeah. And that's because old people vote. We have to be honest. The only young people within this party who are really, really impassioned or are going to all the polls all the time are the people who truly believe in that kind of a deep conservative message. Yeah. But a lot of people who are somewhat conservative, they're fiscally conservative or they're more moderate, they're just not voting.
Yeah.
Are you guys looking forward to getting old and being like, Donald Trump was the best president ever? It's going to be so
nice. Can you imagine? It's so funny how
like
everybody's
65,
like...
we got click. Yeah.
Yeah, we're all like, oh, George Bush. We miss George Bush.
You know, I actually saw...
What fresh hell is this?
I saw a poll which stated that Democrats had a plus 10 approval rating of George Bush.
Oh,
you mean
honest to God?
During his presidency or after?
No, right now.
Yeah, because he seems reasonable. He really does.
He's a human being compared to a flaming turd.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I mean, today he is a reasonable person. During his presidency, he was not, right? I mean,
he was not, exactly. I mean, but we saw the same thing with Clinton, too, right?
Yeah.
Like Clinton, you know, for whether you liked him as a president or you didn't, there were plenty of times when after he got out of office, he had these wildly popular opinions. And you're like, if only you had been in a position of power to make a decision about that.
So that is a weird thing,
crazy.
right? Like we see John Boehner, who like I enjoy now, who I absolutely despised while in power, but he's
God,
I like him now,
worse.
Right? But why is it that you can't be that way while in power, right? I mean, this is kind of the scientist problem too. Is like, why can't you be this really likable person while in power and such?
Well, it's so calculated. Politicians' whole job is to stay in power. Like that's the bummer about the way that our political system is structured. It's like, I just got to get reelected. I got to get all the funding. I can't piss anybody off. I got to keep everybody happy.
Piss off the right people, right? And
exactly. Not the people who are paying for my campaign. And it's just all about the next reelection, And then once they're out of options and their term limits are up, then they can say what they really wanted to say.
Yeah.
And even in the second term of a president's term in office, if you look at how they speak, I mean, they're still not completely free because they're managing a Congress which has usually shifted away from them because, you know, we Americans are fickle and the pendulum starts to swing. And you're managing a whole bunch of people that want to earn re-election. And
they're also representing a party. They want to get the next Democrat or Republican in right after them, so they have to stay true to their party.
Yeah, it's so hard because they're always trying to win a job, and you can't truly be honest as a politician. You know, but except I do want to call something out. You know, we talked about how to actually affect real change, and I do want to call out people for not focusing at all on state politics. Yeah. That's where the one hand can shift a lever of power. I can send a text message to my representative who is a Republican, and he will respond to me through Facebook. So
I can't do that because I live in Los Angeles. But
because there's millions of you.
The good news is my representative is Adam Schiff, who is freaking awesome. And so he pretty much represents my interests to a T. But I mean, think about even beyond state. Think about local politics.
That's right.
You can freaking run.
School board.
You can be on the damn board. You know what I mean? You can actually make major decisions.
And here in New
Mexico,
influence them. That was a big deal. They were trying to get rid of a whole bunch of stuff in New Mexico. They were trying to, climate change denialism. And people got mad, but it wouldn't have even have come up if the right people had been on these, boards, right? And that's the problem, right? Is that we as progressives and liberals, we sort of tend to see our wins on a federal level, and we haven't been focusing on the state and local, and that is a huge problem. You're right, Sam. Yeah,
we're very top down.
That is a very big problem.
I think we also, though, it's like politics is complicated and everybody has a job. You know what I mean? It's like they got shit to worry about. It's like I got to raise my family. I got to be good at my job. I've got to focus on this thing that matters to me. And I'm going to follow what's in the news. But the news is mostly going to cover things that affect the biggest number of people. Right. It's not going to be covering things that are happening at the local level. And newspapers are dying, and keeping up with all the different dates and all the different hearings and all the different meetings and exactly what is the protocol for making sure that this person gets elected to their seat, and there's a straw poll, and is there a primary, and it's confusing. Like, we don't make it easy for our constituents to actually, for the citizens to actually engage politically.
No.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So Dan Carlin had a really interesting idea, which was that maybe one day we'll each have an AI essentially in Congress. We'll get rid of representatives, and we'll each have an AI representative who basically knows what we'd like and will only bug us on things that it really doesn't know what we'd like. And then we could essentially all have a representation in a legislative body. And I thought that was kind of a fascinating idea.
That they're just like, hey, you're going to be pissed about this bill that's about to go through.
Yeah, so how do you want me to vote on this one? I'm not sure how you'd like to vote. And then, I thought it was kind of fascinating, as a concept.
I would also love to see, and I know that this sounds like horribly treacherous and so liberal of me, but like, why, like a lot of other developed nations, don't we have mandatory elections? Why aren't we forced to vote? At the very least, why do we vote on Tuesday?
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
Tuesday, we need to definitely change that. Yeah.
But I think
why don't we
all have to.
We're all violently agreeing with each other, and we
See, that's
I was going to say that I think we should have a 2-week period where we can vote. I mean, what's this whole thing with voting on one specific day and just being this voterama? And I'm in Washington State. We mail in our ballots.
Oh, yeah.
So in LA, I'm a permanent mail-in voter, so I voted like a month before the election.
I am all about just national mail-in ballot. I think that's a fantastic idea. Like, it'll save so much money. Like, it would save an insane amount of money, and I think more people vote in mail-in ballots. That's just like a proven statistic.
Well, yeah, because you don't have to leave your house. It's awesome. It's like the easiest thing in the world. Also, like, we have to pay our taxes, don't we? Like, we still do things that are required of us by our government. Like, why don't we vote on our taxes? And how about while we're at it, I'm about to solve every problem that you guys probably ever talk about on the show. Are you ready for this?
Oh, yeah.
Campaign finance reform.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's so sad how everything comes down to that, really, at its core.
And while we're at it, we'll eliminate the Electoral College and we'll institute instant runoff balloting so that everybody can vote for a third-party candidate and for the major frontrunners. And everyone will be happy, and we have solved all problems.
And we'll use CRISPR to make unicorns, and everyone gets a unicorn. It's going to be so
I want a CRISPR unicorn, but I want a CRISPR-Cas12 unicorn, not a CRISPR-Cas9 unicorn. That's so yesterday.
I want one with wings.
I want one that's just a perfectly genetically hybridized, not hybridized, changed.
I want Shira's unicorn. Can I get Shira's unicorn? She had the flying unicorn. It was the
unicorns should fly.
Oh my god! I can't believe I have to look up the name of the unicorn.
Do they a Pegasus but with a horn?
Yes.
But don't all unicorns fly?
Swiftwind.
Okay, I'm gonna find out if Pegasi have horns.
Oh my god!
No, Pegasus.
I don't think Pegasus
doesn't have a horn.
Yeah,
but what I'm saying is, do all unicorns have Pegasus wings?
No. Some just fly magically without wings.
I see, but they all fly, huh?
They do all fly.
Pegasus is a winged unicorn. So I guess
Pegasus is a winged horse.
A winged horse.
I don't think it's a unicorn.
They don't have.
Also,
I meant Swiftwind. I'm sorry, Swiftwind is a winged unicorn. I'm sorry,
okay. But also, regardless, a Pegasus and a unicorn with wings, those are definitely not like aerodynamic. Like there's no way they could ever get lift.
Am I talking to three scientists who are telling me that I can't have a flying horse? Dang it!
A flying horse or a flying monkey.
And this is why liberals
or
lose
flying
elections.
Car.
I know.
Because we should just say you're going to get a winged unicorn and screw the details, right?
Exactly.
The details are.
And then it shows up and it's just a regular donkey, but at least you'll get something.
That we skipped over the whole unicorn part and just went straight to the aerodynamics of the flying unicorn.
Yeah, I mean, really, horses are not evolved well for aerodynamics.
For flight,
Yeah, for flight.
I don't even think it's the. I don't even think it's the aerodynamics. I think it's just too heavy. You'd have to have 30-foot long wings.
Is it an African or a European sparrow?
Ooh, yeah.
European sparrow?
Pony.
My God,
Pony.
I can't think tonight.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sorry, Monty Python.
I know.
Yeah. I was just in Africa, and I saw they didn't really have horses. Well, there were a few horses in Morocco where I was, but there were a lot of donkeys.
They're called zebras, right? As I understand.
No, I was not in sub-Saharan Africa. Thank you. I was up in the Sahara Desert. There are no zebras over there. But they do. Yeah, there are a lot of donkeys and camels. Many camels.
Did you rode a camel. A dromedary too? Did you get a dromedary?
I rode one.
Awesome.
It was really cool.
Would you keep one as a pet?
No, they're disgusting. They're like.
What if CRISPR could make one that's like the size of a dog, like the size of Killer? Like, what would you do?
If it could make it the size of Killer, but also make it like not spit and actually listen to me when I told it what. Because that's the thing. I'd be on this camel and I'm with these like Sahrawi in the middle of the Sahara, and we're filming scene, and then the camel out of nowhere is like, "I'm gonna lie down now," and I'm like, getting fucked off of it. I'm like, what? Stand up, fuck! Because when they lie down, they violently pitch forward and back.
Oh wow!
You know, because they go down on their knees.
Yeah.
And so you're at this really extreme angle, and you have to hold on so tight so you don't fall off. And they just do it out of nowhere. And I'm like, really, guys? And they're like, I don't know. He does what he does. He's a camel. He's a dick.
Yeah. They're really only half domesticated.
Exactly. And I did not, unfortunately, drink camel milk. My producers did, some of them, but I knew we had a 5.
Ill?
Well, no, they actually were okay, but we had a 5-hour drive ahead of us, and I asked our handler, our fixer, actually, like, hey, should I do this? Is it good? Am I going to feel good after? Because we have this long drive and I have to be on camera after that. And he was like, camel milk, very good. People come from very far away to have it. It'll just clean you right out. I was like, I'll pass.
Yeah, well, that's rough. All right. Well, Cara, thank you for solving all of our political problems tonight.
You're welcome. It was no sweat.
Much sooner. And so, Cara, where can people find you? What's the best place to check out your podcast and your Twitter and such?
Oh, gosh. So probably if you go to my website, which is carasantamaria.com, you will link out to everything. My Twitter, which is, /Cara Santa Maria. My Instagram, Cara_Santa_Maria, because, of course, I came to Instagram late. Lame. My Facebook, I think my page is facebook.com/ScienceCara. But you can find my podcast, Talk Nerdy, on my website, carasantamaria.com. And you can also find links to my Patreon if you would like to support the show, as well as video clips and, press coverage and all that kind of stuff.
Cara is not George Soros funded, so please do help her out. Yes.
No, we are, of course.
Of course.
So,
as is every political
still waiting on my
podcast.
check from Science March.
Really?
Yeah, I was going to say, no. If you were to ask anybody who takes issue with my stance on GMOs, I am apparently a shill for Monsanto, and they bought me a Ferrari or some shit. So
of course,
yeah,
I've had that accusation myself. So
can you get one for me?
I know, right? It would be nice.
Asking for a friend. Yeah. Hey Nation, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to give us a like, share, or a comment. If you like what Porp is doing and what you hear, why not consider becoming a supporting member? Help us do more. Join today at partyofreasonandprogress.org. The Party of Reason and Progress is a registered IRS 527 organization. Contributions made to Porp or other IRS 527 organizations are not tax deductible.
Politics Within Reason is the official podcast of the Party of Reason and Progress.